The Nimzowitsch Sicilian after e4, c5, knight f3, and knight f6. Black is putting pressure on e4 immediately. The main move is e5. I'm going to go through it in the next video. White can play, well, d3 is just silly because it blocks the bishop and it's passive. And I'm also going to explain that later. I'm going to go through the all swaps variation in this video. After knight c3, which protects the pawn, black keeps putting pressure on that with d5. So black's very aggressive. Now again, white can push e5, but in this video I'm going through the all swaps variation. Pawn takes, knight takes, and now in order to avoid a swap of knight potentially, knight takes and queen takes. So this is the all swap line. And now the development of the white pieces. Let's say white goes bishop e2, knight c6, and after castling, black plays fianchetto. This bishop will be in g7. Ready to put pressure on the crucial d4 square, which is the one that we're going to go through. We're going to try to keep control of and potentially stopping d4. So in order to make clear about the weaknesses that can arise potentially in the white's play in this game, I'm going to go for a move that is that's definitely not the best. White plays c4 here, which loses control of d4, and black now just goes back with the queen. Putting the queen in the center would be silly also because of rook e1 and just too much development from white. The strength of the black player now are the dark central squares that white gave up basically. After rook e1 and bishop g7, now white's only way to develop this bishop, unless he wants to play rook b1, is d3. Rook b1 is not very good because of the future threat of bishop f5 and knight b4 and so on. So after d3, black castles. Now white has to continue the development. So after a move like bishop e3 targeting this pawn is going to be protected by b6. Not because we should protect the pawn, not because it's just so crucial to go and defend the pawn if we're done in development, but rather because this is the natural square. D7 is not natural square to develop the light split bishop. This bishop will have no point in going here because it's not pinning anything, and also this king side is fianchettoed. So after h3, the bishop will have to move back again, so that's nonsensical. So b6 is the move to protect the pawn. Of course, going for this pawn will be completely wrong because it gives so much initiative to the opponent. Also, we lose the c pawn eventually, just to go and pick up the pawn, b pawn that's pointless. So after a normal move like queen d2, and black develops here, and black now has full control of the game. Now this looks like a completely normal opening, and the point of showing this is not about hoping that all of this will exactly happen, but rather making a point about the weaknesses that have been created after white played completely normal looking moves which are actually weak. The mistake was the development of the bishop in e2 and the fact that after the fianchetto, white was forced to play these d3 and c4 moves to try and kick out the queen, for example, giving up the control of the d4 square, and black will be working on that for the rest of the game. So how does this start? It starts with queen to d6 in order to push e5 and then place a knight in d4. So now it's white to move. Let's say white wants to actually activate that bishop, which has no future in these squares. The pawn cannot push because there's too many attackers there. So let's say bishop f1 with the idea of fianchetto, queen d6, and after normal looking move, rook d1 and e5, g3 in order to activate the light split bishop. Finally, black goes for what he wanted to go through. For what he wanted to go for since the beginning of the game, knight d4. Now this is just a too strong knight, threatening too much stuff. Bishop g2 doesn't work because there's two attackers here. So after knight takes, black recaptures with the c pawn. forcing the white bishop away. Now, the bishop can go to h6 or g5. If he goes to g5, again, the superiority of the space earned by black here is evident. Black is threatening. Black has already got quite a lot of control over the light squares, and black pieces are cramped. So now black goes on with b5. The idea is to take, and get a passed pawn. If white were to take, now black plays this move, which will be seen a lot during the Nimzowitsch games. f6 is a completely safe move to play. White bishop can only go to h6, can't go to h4 due to being trapped. So after bishop h6, black dominates the light squares. Now the only move is f3, stops the mate threat, because after queen takes pawn, then the queen will be able to also reach these crucial squares. So black now deflects the queen, bishop takes, queen f3 with the mate threat to happen soon. Queen h3, getting the queen closer to the defending of the king. Black continues with queen check, king f2, and now queen d5, targeting free pawn. Well, another one as well. Black pieces are just much better, and black king is safer. Black rooks are able to join open file and line up. Black's position is much better, and the pawn structure as well. Black's pawn structure is perfect. White has an isolated pawn and a doubled up one. After a move like a4, which seems to protect both pawns, black goes on with a very natural rook c8, and after rook e2, just stopping the rook from reaching the second rank and then doubling up, black just has the plan of going to b3 with the queen and start picking up pawns and go to a very easy winning endgame. Now I'm going to go back a few moves and play a variation where white does not play this bishop f1 with the idea of fianchetto moves in order to keep his light squares better, and try to develop the light square bishop in a different way. So just a few moves back. If white decides to just move the knight and go for some bishop g4 or bishop f3 idea, white can try also the more played type of move, bishop h6, the usual move that aims at removing one of the defenders of the king, the powerful fianchetto bishop. Black goes on with the plan of the control of the square d4. So bishop takes, king takes, and now again black's plan remains the same. Queen d6 and then knight d4, and an idea that white could have in trying to take more control of the square d4 obviously is to challenge the c5 square, which is the whole point of playing Sicilian. This pawn is the one that attacks d4, so white can try the usual a3, and after queen d6, the idea of b4 has to be delayed for the moment because black just has too many attackers. So after queen d6, black's plan now can the scenario of the black player can be just the same as usual, and moves like f6, rook f to d8, and then pinning the d3 pawn, pushing e4. All of these ideas are just happening again, and they applied pretty much in every Nimzowitsch Sicilian. In case white plays something like rook b1, trying to actually go for b4, then a5 keeps black's just full control of the board. The crucial mistake was to play bishop e2 at the beginning, having then no way to develop it in the future, and just keep it like this, with the d3 pawn and the c4 pawn to just punish white. This is another scenario. Earlier I went through bishop e3 attacking the pawn. If things get slightly different, if white were to play a move like developing the bishop like in g5 for example, or in this case the b2 pawn is not poisoned because the b7 pawn is protected. So after rook b1 and bishop g7, white develops the queen to d2, and b6 comes anyway. So basically, any move that is not bishop e3 for the development of this bishop just loses the b2 pawn. Bishop f4 or d2 would have resulted in the same problem. Now in this scenario as well, black will still go on with the same f6 and e5 plan. Queen d6, all of these moves just the same. So after the natural h4, which comes because of the fianchetto situation, also because white bishop can't really develop by the queen side, it's going to have to go from the king side somehow. So white is hoping to move the knight at some point and get some counterplay. Black now can develop the bishop to g4 with the aim of queen d7, then f6 and e5 as usual, with the knight eventually reaching the famous d4 square. And one more scenario that I will mention is this one. So if white does not develop the bishop yet, but rather plays rook b1 first to protect the pawn and then develop the bishop to better square rather than e3, because in e3 the bishop will still be subject to attack of the c-pawn after the swap with knight. So if white plays, and also for the obvious reason that white wants to start creating an attack on b4, eventually with a3 and b4 and so on, black plays a5 immediately. So after such move, black controls b4 and d4. White has to develop the bishop, but bishop f4 is met by e5 because it's happening anyway, so it's one of the recurring moves. f6 is coming as well. So after bishop, for example, to d2, white can try to go and swap with a powerful g7 bishop, maybe in c3. Black goes on with the usual moves. They happen all the time. b6 to develop the bishop in this excellent diagonal, and after a3, which is possible in this case because the bishop in d2 is offering more help to b4. Black plays the crucial bishop f5, putting more pressure on this d3 pawn. A move like b4 now doesn't help because of pawn takes, knight takes, and then white takes in an attempt of, first of all, breaking the pawn structure by giving a double isolated pawn to black, but also allowing the queen to defend d3. Black simply takes, and rook can't take back because of bishop c3 fork. So the bishop is going to c3 more anyway. Black has the bishop pair and the passed pawn. White has a knight that can't move anywhere and the silly bishop. So black's got much better winning chances here. So I'm gonna restart and I'm gonna replay the Nimzowitsch all swaps after knight takes and queen takes. Earlier, white did the crucial mistake of playing the non-positional c4 move. After bishop e2 and knight c6 and then castle, pawn g6 and d3. White doesn't have to play, of course, the bad the bad c4 moves. He can play c3 to weaken the impact of the fianchetto bishop. Black goes on with castling, and after bishop e3 and the usual b6, black can finally play d4, trying to seize control over that square and maybe force a few swaps and not have to fight for it anymore. Not to mention that that actually gives the bishop the possibility to move somewhere and enjoy greater freedom, unlike the previous situation when white played c4, which was silly. So black in this case is forced to take, and after pawn takes, well, of course pawn takes because um, after if bishop takes, then knight takes bishop. White just loses the bishop pair for no reason and no compensation in an open game. white will have to take with the pawn and get an isolated pawn, so that's the price he's paying for pushing d4. If you were to take with the knight, then black can swap everything. Bishop takes, and if queen takes, pawn takes. White has an isolated pawn, but black has a very easy way to go and target it in the future, and there's no reason for white to create to go for a weaker endgame. And even if queen didn't take in d4, then the pawn will be isolated anyway after all the swaps. So um, so black takes, pawn takes, and white keeps the pieces on the board, trying to find some activity. And now black develops to the bishop to b7. So in this scenario, either with a d3 and c4 or d3 and c4 idea, any single time there's a Nimzowitsch Sicilian with the bishop e2, the plan is pretty much the same all the time. Now, the queen is very well placed, and she's attacking the square in a2. So if white were to play any of these moves like rook to c1, for instance, then this pawn is not poisoned, but for obvious reasons, because all the pieces on the queen side are protecting each other. So, presuming that white will want to put the rook on an open file um, and make sure it doesn't lose the pawn in a2, white can play a move like queen a4, and after e6 and rook ac1 and a6, this looks like a completely normal game, um, except black's position is much better. Black bishops are stronger, and black's pawn structure is superior. Black is about to gain more space on the queen side with b5 and move the knight to e7 and potentially f5. So after a move like b3, so the white could gain some freedom for the queen because the queen was protecting the pawn in a2. A move like b5 is coming anyway. Queen a3 and then bishop f8 attacking the queen. Queen is forced to move. Knight e7 is happening in order to allow an infiltration and potentially in the future an infiltration of the rooks and maybe a rook lift. Um, White can go on with the best move, which is rook c5, and after queen d6 and knight e5, the knight finds a great square in d5. The idea is to make this bishop even less active, also because the f4 square is denied by the knight, and g5 will come with a fork, and h6 is protected. So after the obvious rook c1 lift, black is in full control of the game. After knight takes bishop, which does reunite the pawn structure in the center, but white continues the game with black continues the game with queen d8, and the bishop pair had literally no weaknesses, whereas white has very weak e3 pawn, and black now is controlling the open file, since the white rook will have to either swap or retreat, which will allow black to improve the position of his rooks in the near future.